On this episode, we travel to Las Cruces, New Mexico. We meet the chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Advisory Committee. Then we talk with the head of a new transit system. The public gives input to a new comprehensive plan. Finally, a walker enjoys meeting people on transit. Stay tuned.
We're talking with George Pearson. What was the committee that you just chaired?
This was the Metropolitan Planning Organization Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Advisory Committee. So the MPO is our regional planning organization, and we have two advisory committees to the policy committee. Our bicycle committee is one, and there's a technical advisory committee is the other.
And what sort of things are you typically talking about?
We try to focus on bicycle and pedestrian issues. We see some of the routine business for monies that come in, federal funds that come through. So we approved today a TIP amendment, Transportation Improvement Plan amendment, that changes the way money is spent from the federal level and the state administers it. And but we also try to do work towards some of the planning documents that the MPO has, which includes a bicycle facilities plan to try to improve bicycling in the MPO area.
Has the committee been around for a while?
It has been. It originally started probably about 2000 and made some transition change. First it was the Bicycle BFAC, Bicycle Facilities Advisory Committee, and then at some point it got changed to Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I was on the very first committee, and then I left for a few years, and now I came back, and to punish me, they made me chairman.
Have you seen the issues you've been discussing advance it all over the years? Are we making progress?
Compared to where we started, we've had like 3 disjoint bike paths in town. And now we have a map that pretty well connects pretty good bicycle connectivity so that you can find a way from point A to point B and actually ride it with some assurance of being able to get where you want to go safely on a bicycle. So yes, we still have work to do, but we've advanced from basically starting from zero 15, 20 years ago.
And adding pedestrian to the name, what new things do you have to deal with now?
I think it's just trying to be more aware that so that when we consider the facilities, that we consider all modes of transportation. We don't have a direct relationship with transit, but everybody that uses a bus becomes pedestrian. All of our buses have bike racks on them, and typically it's anecdotal, but if you watch a city bus, you're going to see a bicycle on the rack. So it's pretty well used, I believe.
What sort of changes would you like to see in the county, in the area, before you're finished up with your stretch as chairman?
Well, one of the areas that we're a little bit weak on, I think, are some trail facilities. New bicyclists, everybody says, well, I rode a bike when I was a kid, but I'm not going to touch a bike now. It's too dangerous out there with traffic. If we have some trail facilities where you can get to some locations away from traffic, that'll encourage people to start getting on their bicycles. And once they're on their bicycle, they can figure out, well, I can use this other road that's maybe not so heavily traveled. And once they get confidence on that, then, well, I can use this other road that really gets me to where I want to go. So starting with the trails and building up to the different levels of road facilities, that's something to work towards, and improving our trail facilities. We have a loop trail essentially now that goes 3/4 of the way around the city, along the river, and then on the north side up towards the interstate, I-25, and then across I-25 towards the university. And then we have you can get down the other way, but we don't have a dedicated trail for that. And that's like a 20-mile loop or something around the city. And the next thing we really need to do is to have some infill in that so that you can connect through some of the areas. We've got some planning documents that we've done with the city that have identified. We have EBID, which is their Elephant Butte Irrigation District, has right-of-way where they put water through from Elephant Butte Lake, and there's possibility of putting trails along those routes. So we've got some potential facilities. It's a matter of actually using those facilities and working out. The lawyers, of course, have to be involved because there's liability issues to indemnify each other against, but that's something that is doable. Required an act of the legislature to be able to do that, but that has happened. So better trails will get more people on bikes. Once they're on bikes, they'll be brave enough, I think, to figure out that it really is healthful and a convenient way to get from point A to point B.
We're talking with David Armijo, who's Executive Director of the South Central Regional Transit District. What is the district?
The district is a multi-county district, 3 counties here in the southern New Mexico, about 7,800 square miles. So it's very rural, very large area. We do encompass 8 municipalities, including the second largest city in the state of New Mexico, Las Cruces.
What other transit operations are there in this region?
Well, we have 5, actually, surprisingly. I started my career here 30 years ago, and there was only 1, so we've grown. We have 5 districts. We have a transit agency in El Paso called Sun Metro. The transit agency here locally in Las Cruces is Roadrunner. We, SCRTD, we connect those 2 districts through our county, Doñana, that connect between the 2. And then we have 2 other systems. Locally in El Paso, there's the El Paso County Transit, which also operates a little bit into the western part of Texas, all the way to Anthony, Texas, where we're at, in Anthony, Texas, Anthony, New Mexico, 2 cities. And then there's the Park and Ride, which is the Gold Line that operates with limited stops between the 2 cities of El Paso and Las Cruces.
How difficult is it to coordinate between all these systems in what might seem to be a relatively small area?
Well, fortunately, there's 5 systems, so that means there's 5 people running them. So we can all fit in one room with one conference table. So fortunately, we're able to communicate very well. And of course, we're in a digital era, so the fact that we're 40 miles apart doesn't dissuade us from being able to communicate. We also work very well with our staffs and our teams. And I think overall, it tells a lot about the community and the growth that we've had, that there's that many transit districts. Our ridership has doubled in the first year that we've been operating service, so we're doing very well. So a lot of people needing service to get from point A to point B.
And as a practically brand new service, what's involved in getting a new transit district started?
Long days and long nights. Essentially, it's the same as you would be anywhere. I mean, you got to start getting, you have your buses, your staff, training, connecting the services, producing public timetables, bus schedules, and then just getting the word out. And today we're fortunate now because we have social media. And so once people saw the bus, they saw our website, they could call us, they could link with us 24/7, and we were able to communicate with them. And I believe that's one of the other reasons why the ridership has been so fast in its growth in the first year. I anticipate that will continue to grow probably another 50% in the second year until we get to a more level effort of what we do. But most importantly is that we are all working very well with the connections of the other services. So ultimately, all 5 lines, we're all carrying more people as a result because we're just carrying people who need to get from A to B.
Now, when you're going out and deciding where you're going to put all these brand new bus stops, what consideration goes into where the bus stops go?
Well, we had a lot of community meetings, and so we had people in some of the smaller communities indicate they were interested. So we put a lot of stops in places where we thought people would be, and some of those were obvious, like city centers and schools and universities and so on, and some were not. And in fact, it really became the riders telling us where the stop should go. I was thinking about how we move people as pedestrians. Sometimes architects will build a facility and not put the sidewalk in, and let's see where the paths are. And once you know what path there is, then you put the sidewalk in. I think for us it's a little bit like that. We've added a lot of stops, and as we've added stops, we've added ridership.
And speaking of pedestrians, How difficult is it for people to walk to some of your stops? Is it good infrastructure out there, or what's going on?
It's very limited. When we're in the urbanized zones of either El Paso, Texas, or Las Cruces, New Mexico, it's a little bit easier. We have sidewalks, we have infrastructure that's built in. When we connect into the rural communities, La Mesa, even Anthony, some of the smaller cities, Santa Teresa, you don't always have the infrastructure. So we have to be cognizant of that, look for opportunities where we have lighting, try to find the safety modes the best we can, locate the stops where we can so that the stops are accessible and safe, because we do have accessible buses, so we have to be able to do that. It's very challenging for us to accomplish that.
Who do you have to work with to make those improvements so that someone in the wheelchair can manage to get to the bus stop and get on your bus?
Well, interesting enough, even though we're in a large service area, I was surprised that many of our major arterials are actually state highways. They don't look like it because they're rural and they're two-lane roads, but in point of fact, they're state highways. So the state actually had to come in and review and approve our location of signs. We were doing that at Christmas 2015, and I was quite amazed that I had actual people out there working Christmas week. And I remember asking one of the individuals, well, why is it that you're being so gracious to us? And the gentleman was real clear. He said his family and community lives in these small urban areas, rural areas, and they felt it was very important that they have that access and service. So they gave us higher priority than any place I've been to, including LA and Dallas, for getting that kind of support from the state. So we really appreciated the help.
What's the future? Where would you like to grow your service in the next decade?
Well, we have two more. We have a little logo which shows that we're multimodal, and everybody asks the question. So we also working on a pilot right now for a carpool vanpool program into Santa Teresa. Santa Teresa and their airport and the border crossing is becoming the number one infrastructure and economic growth engine of the state of New Mexico. So lots of opportunities there. They're looking at building little villages for housing for the people who work out there as that grows over the years. Addition to that is we've also been working on commuter rail, or what we call passenger rail study. That study will be completed within the next 30 days. We'll be taking that information forward. It does look like there's a great opportunity for ridership. There's an available line between the two cities with the potential for some federal funding. I think that's going to be an opportunity that the mayors of the cities of Las Cruces and El Paso and the two MPOs will have to have some dialogue and discussion as to how they would want to move forward with that. But the public comment, the 1,000 or so people who participate in the survey, were very positive and engaged that we should be looking at this type of a service between the community, in part because it allows for clean air, it allows us to deal with a lot of the infrastructure needs that we have in the region, and I think that's the next step.
We're talking with Srijana Basnyat, who's a senior planner. What's going on here tonight?
So we're having an open house, basically displaying the participation that we've had so far in the comprehensive plan update. So we have a theme called Healthy Communities, and we're trying to get some policies updated and hopefully ready for City Council to adopt soon. So this is basically everything that you see here is just people telling us what they want to see in their new comprehensive plan.
What are some of the themes you've seen that keep coming up? What do people want to see?
So we've had a lot of wanting access to more destinations, having a walking and bicycle-friendly community, really. So that's been like the center of the Healthy Community chapter, because we are basically trying to say that with all of the lovely, weather that we have here, that we need to really capitalize and be more active outdoors and have an active lifestyle. Yeah. So everything that comes with that, in terms of like public transit or wider sidewalks, more trees, more destinations to actually walk to, and having a sort of different type of development where you have a mix of uses, so people can work and play and live, in one area.
So what are the steps this has gone through so far? How long have you been working on this?
For a little bit. We actually started off with a citywide survey. So it was a random sample survey, and people really were asked, how do you want to see your city grow? And that was like the general question for the comprehensive plan. And then in particular, we have the Healthy Community Chapter. And so we centered on questions like, what would make you bike more or walk more, And so that's what got us sort of started. And then we hired our consultants from Blue Zones, Dan Burden and Samantha. They are experts on the built environment. So most things to do with health are preventable through the built environment, through our physical surroundings. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but your zip code determines, your lifespan more than like any other single factor.
It's a sad fact of life that
Right.
that it can have that much impact.
Right. And so it matters how we do develop, how we design our cities. And so we've had walk audits. Those are like walking workshops where people sort of walk around their own neighborhoods. They see what are the barriers and what are the opportunity areas and how they could make that area more walkable, basically. And so we had those sort of spread out in the city. We had 6 of those. We had a walk with the mayor. We also did a bike tour. So we also invited Dr. Richard Jackson and Dr. Suzanne Lennard down here a few months after that to talk about kid-friendly cities and designing for healthy communities particularly. So we had a workshop when they were here, and we invited the public to Las Cruces High School. Where they mapped out, and you can see some of the stuff that they worked on over there. And they talked about what they would like to see as far as, what would get them outdoors and doing stuff and making the community more walkable.
What are some of the things that makes a city kid-friendly?
That's a good question. So they say that if you design a city for a kid, you're basically designing it for every age and every demographic group, just because kids are like the lowest common denominator in that sense. Things like, we don't really think much about this, but I mean, what is the importance of having public spaces? It's really for social interaction, and it's for exercise, but that's not just it. So having things, and I'll give you a little quick example. If you've ever been to any other city, you might have seen public art, and some of them are just touchable art, and things like that are very important to children. If you have a statue, it's actually important for them to be able to touch and explore and actually climb on them. So thinking in terms of what sort of cultivates and nurtures a child's sensibilities and their social skills, but also an independence, because most kids are so dependent on their parents to just chauffeur them around town, for their activities. But kids actually need to feel a certain sense of independence. So can they walk over to their friend's house? Can they go play a game without, their parents hovering over them 100% of the time? Of course, it depends on how old a child is and things like that. And being a mom, I'm really careful. But generally speaking, we don't design our children or our cities specifically for children. And they're sort of like the forgotten age group in that sense. But that was really Dr. Leonard's specialty area, and she has a lot more to say about that. You should probably get her book, which I don't really remember the title right now, but yeah.
So, what do you hope to get out of tonight's, public session?
So this is really a thank you to the public for coming with us this far in the public engagement process, and just letting them see, all the stuff that's happened so far. And then they can come in and they can sort of vote for their favorite policies, or express their concerns on our little cards that we have. And they can have conversations with our planners. So we have that table over there where, it's the discussion table. So they can, if they have questions or they want to go more in depth on a particular topic, they can just invite one of us to sit with them and chat. So it's just an open format, and people are just welcome to wander in and grab something to eat, and I don't know, and even listen to other people's points of views. So not everybody agrees. It's always interesting to hear different perspectives. And then afterwards at 6 o'clock, we have our Planning and Zoning Commission work session. So that's when they're gonna get more information on some of the past focus groups that we've had more recently, and then they're gonna give us general direction.
We're in Las Cruces talking with Charles Clements. What was walking like when you were growing up as a lad?
I grew up in a mining camp in the Colorado Rockies, so it was mostly up and down the mountainside, and it was above timberline, so it was mostly rocks. And the saying was you had to be careful when you fell down because you might not stop falling. And I just got used to walking and hiking around and stayed that way, I guess.
What was your first experience with public transportation?
Seattle. I worked at a shipyard there, and I used the bus sometimes to get to and from work. And I guess the thing that first got my attention was there were people on that bus that knew each other because they'd been commuting for years. And so they kind of look forward to the commute to work. Most people don't. But they look forward to the commute to work because they would visit with each other, and others would read, very relaxed.
As you've gone around different parts of the world, what's been your experience with with walking and with transit in different places?
Well, by far the place that was the most set up for walking and public transit was England. They have lots of paths and lots of gardens, and the villages are pretty well set up for you to walk, and the cars are secondary. The trick of getting out of the airport and going out and having 3 options besides driving on the wrong side of the road was very appealing. And I used the train from Gatwick to Clapham and to Southampton, and then in Southampton you had the buses, you had a ferry boat across the river. And once again, I got to meet people riding on the train I would have never met. And I ended up in a little town called Bewley to stay for the time when I was there. It was a business trip. And there was a tea shop there. And, I wouldn't have, if I'd been driving through, I wouldn't have ever stopped and even noticed it. But I got to go in and meet ladies that had been there their whole lives, and they had traveled the whole world. They'd been to Australia and India and all this, and they had never lived any place but Bewley. And I thought, how fascinating, how cosmopolitan they were in this little village. I don't know, that was my first experience at what I would call public transit coordinated in a total fashion. And of course that was back when Maggie Thatcher was fairly new as Prime Minister, and I don't know what happened after she did it. I understand she made a lot of changes, but my experience then was very pleasant, and it opened up new ideas for me as far as what we could do in this country.
In this country, the places you've seen, who's doing it the best?
Well, probably places like, Seattle and Portland both have pretty good public transit as far as I can tell. The Bay Area has, the BART system is very, very good. The buses maybe not so good. New York, I understand they've cleaned it up quite a bit from the last time I was there, but the subway system goes a lot of places. It's a very efficient way of going about the town. It's just that when I was there at the time I was there, it was not very well kept. But I think New York probably has a good public transit system, and it's a good thing considering how stopped up the traffic seems to stay there all the time. I wouldn't think of driving in the city myself. I'd park in New Jersey and go some other way. So I'd say those places have probably got the best public transit system. We in Las Cruces have a good one for the size of a community. It's 100,000 people. We have a good city bus system. We have a county system that is struggling to get on its feet and grow. The older parts of Las Cruces and most of the newer ones, there's like a gap in the 60s and 70s where it was all set up to just do cars. But before that, a lot of sidewalks, and I live in the older part of town, and it's very easy to walk about and get where you need to go. There are big sidewalks up in the east side where they have the big houses, but it won't seem like people do much walking there. They ride down to the golf course and then walk. But here in town, this is a very livable place from a lot of respects, and the ability to get around town without having a car is pretty good, I'd say.
So are you still meeting people, riding transit and walking?
Oh yeah, in fact, it's kind of funny. We have the university here in MSU, and I've met people from Ecuador, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, from all over the world on the buses. I've met people that were homeless, people that had just gotten out of prison, people that were old enough to be my mother, and children, and we have a lot of the school children come on the buses for field trips. And so I get to see all these people that I wouldn't get to see at my age living where I live in my apartment complex if I didn't have this exit from my world into the other world out there. And I found that's a really fun addition to life. Meeting these people, getting to know them, looking forward to seeing them the next time I'm on the bus or when I'm walking down the street. It adds so much to know your community, to know the people in it. It's not just a place to live, it's a place to kind of nurture and grow, even though I'm well past growing, in some respects. But I still think I have grown a lot through this interchange with people. We've got to understand them more. I think it helps me understand social problems maybe better from that experience rather than just depending on a television set to educate me.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.